My girlfriend and I had been planning a quiet camping trip for weeks. We wanted to be completely off-grid. No crowds, no service, just trees and silence. I found a spot on national forest land in Idaho, the kind of place where the dirt roads stretch for miles and you don't see another car all day. It wasn't an official campground, just a clearing by a small creek about an hour down a rough, rocky road. Perfect. We got there late afternoon, set up our tent, made a little fire ring with rocks, and stacked some extra wood. I brought my trail cam, too. I like seeing what animals come through at night, especially in places this remote. I set it up about 30 feet from our tent, aimed down a narrow game trail that cut through the trees. I mounted it low on a trunk, angled upward so it could catch anything moving through. Deer, elk, maybe even a bear if we were lucky. The first night was peaceful. The air was crisp but not too cold, and the stars were ridiculously clear. We heard a few animal sounds. Twigs snapping, something moving through the brush, but nothing alarming. The fire crackled, and we sat close, wrapped in jackets, listening to the sounds of the forest. We went to bed around 11, both of us tired from the drive and the hike in. The second day we explored a bit. There were no trails, so we just wandered. Found a dry riverbed, saw fresh animal tracks, probably elk, and even stumbled on some old, rusted fencing half buried in dirt and leaves. I figured it was from an old homestead or logging operation. It gave me a weird feeling, but not in a spooky way. Just that kind of people used to live out here reminder that makes you realize how forgotten some places are. That evening we made dinner on the camp stove, ramen and hot dogs, and watched the fire again. It was colder that night, and the wind picked up around dusk. The trees creaked a little. I threw on another layer and we huddled close. It was quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet from the night before. I don't know how to explain it, but something felt different. I didn't say anything at the time, didn't want to make her uncomfortable. She was already a little on edge, said the wind made it feel like voices were carrying through the trees. At one point, she paused mid-sentence and asked, "Did you hear that?" I listened. Wind, trees, then maybe a murmur, far off. Not words, just a low, drifting sound that rose and fell, like someone speaking just out of earshot. I told her it was probably the wind bouncing through the hills or carrying sound from far away. But in my chest, I felt something tighten. We put out the fire early that night and crawled into the tent without saying much. I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, not from sound, but from that feeling, like someone was watching us. It sounds dumb, and I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, natural paranoia from being isolated. But I'd lie there, staring up through the roof of the tent, listening to nothing, and still feel something out there. My girlfriend was breathing steady beside me. I didn't want to wake her. At some point, I must have drifted off again, because the next thing I knew, the sun was coming up. We packed up quietly that morning. We weren't in a rush, but we weren't lingering either. She didn't mention the voices again, and I didn't bring it up. We took down the tent, folded the tarp, doused the fire pit with water, and checked the area for trash. I grabbed the trail cam last, popped out the SD card and packed it away. The drive out was slow, and both of us stayed pretty quiet. Just tired, we said. Back home, a few days later, I finally went through the trail cam footage. I was sitting at my desk, my girlfriend in the living room, watching a show. I loaded the images into the software and started clicking through frame by frame. The first night had been active, 3 deer, a pair of raccoons, and what looked like a fox. The second night started out quiet. A few raccoons again, some small movement in the brush. Then, just after 3 a.m., there was a single frame that made my blood run cold. A man. He was maybe 20 feet from our tent, standing right near the edge of the clearing. Camo jacket, hood up, pants tucked into boots. No backpack, no light, just standing there. His face was in shadow, but I could tell he was looking directly at the trail cam, like dead on, like he knew it was there. He wasn't moving, just staring. One frame, the next shot was empty. He never walked in, never walked out. Just that 1 second of him standing there and then gone. I clicked back and forth, frame by frame. Nothing before, nothing after. He didn't step into the frame, didn't walk out of it. just appeared, stood there, gone. My skin went cold. I stared at that photo for what felt like forever. I got up, went into the living room, sat next to my girlfriend. I didn't tell her right away. I didn't know how. Eventually, I showed her the picture. She looked at it for a long time and didn't say anything. Then she asked me to delete it. I didn't, but I also didn't argue. I closed the laptop and we didn't talk about it again that night. Later, I checked the timestamp, 3:14 a.m. That was the night we thought we heard voices. That was the night I couldn't sleep. That was the night I kept feeling like someone was out there. And he was standing right there, close enough to throw a rock at us, just watching. We weren't anywhere near a trail. This wasn't some hiker passing through. We were miles from any maintained road. No marked campsites, no traffic. And he wasn't camping, no gear, no pack, no flashlight. Just standing. Who does that? Why? I haven't gone back to that spot. Honestly, I haven't gone deep woods camping since. I still camp sometimes, but now it's always in designated areas with other people nearby. It changed how I look at these trips. Before, the fear was always about animals, bears, mountain lions, nature. But now I know the scariest thing out there isn't the wildlife. It's the people who come through the woods without a reason. The ones who don't say a word. The ones who don't leave tracks. The ones who just stand there silent at 3 in the morning and then disappear. We had driven 6 hours from Portland to get to that lake. No signs, no nearby towns, just a narrow gravel road twisting through the trees until it opened up to a small clearing beside the water. That was the whole point. Off-grid, no cell reception, just us and nature. Me, my girlfriend Mia, and our friends Ryan and Jess. We'd all camped together before, but this was the most remote we'd ever gone. The lake didn't even have a name on the map we were using. Just a blue shape surrounded by forest in every direction. The first night was peaceful. We set up 2 tents, one for each couple, and built a fire just before the sun dipped behind the pines. We cooked hot dogs on sticks, drank cheap beer from a cooler we'd packed in ice, and watched the stars come out. The silence was perfect. Not a single car, no planes overhead. Just the soft lapping of water and the occasional owl in the distance. The next morning, I woke up early and took the canoe out by myself. Mist hung low over the lake, and everything looked silver. I paddled to the middle and just sat there for a while, not thinking about anything, just letting the quiet settle in. No movement on the water, no wind. I didn't even see any fish jumping. I remember thinking it was kind of eerie how still everything was. Not peaceful anymore, just empty. That afternoon, we hiked around the lake. It took maybe 2 hours to do the full loop, not counting the stops we made. The trees were thick all the way around, and we didn't see any signs of other people. No old fire pits, no footprints, no wrappers or cans. Just untouched woods. We joked that we were probably the first people to camp there in years. That night, after dinner, we sat around the fire again. It was colder than the night before, and a little wind had picked up, rustling through the trees behind us. We stayed up late, probably past midnight. We were just about to call it a night when it happened. A scream echoed across the water, cut straight through the quiet. High-pitched, raw. A human scream. A woman. Not a yell, not someone goofing around. It was screaming the way people scream when something is wrong. We all froze. I remember how the fire suddenly felt too bright, too exposed. We stared across the lake, but it was pitch black out there. We couldn't see the far side, not with just the firelight. No flashlights reached that far. The scream came again, closer this time, and clearer. Help me! Not slurred, not animal-like, not coyotes. It was someone, a woman, scared, alone. Then silence. We didn't speak for maybe a full minute, just sat there holding our breath, listening. Nothing. No branches breaking. No running footsteps, just the crackle of the fire and our own breathing. Ryan finally stood up, grabbed his flashlight and said maybe it was a coyote. But none of us really believed that. Coyotes don't scream for help in a human voice. Mia looked sick. Jess had her arms wrapped around her knees. We checked our phones. No service, not even a bar. I tried walking up the trail we came in on, hoping elevation might help, but still nothing. We debated canoeing across, but I didn't like that idea. I had a bad feeling, and I couldn't explain it. My gut just screamed no. Something about it felt wrong. Not just dangerous, wrong. Like we were being pulled into something we didn't understand. In the end, we stayed put. We moved the fire closer to the tents and kept it burning high. None of us went to sleep. We had a hatchet and a camp knife, and we kept them out. Every now and then we heard sounds in the woods behind us, but they were probably animals. Maybe raccoons, maybe not. By morning, the light started to push away the shadows, and for the first time we could see across the lake clearly. That's when we noticed it. A small campsite on the far shore. We hadn't seen it before, not on our hike around, and not the previous morning when I'd canoed across. It looked old and abandoned, like it had been there a while. The tent was collapsed, one side completely caved in. Gear was scattered across the ground. Plastic bags, a tarp flapping in the wind, something that looked like a sleeping bag halfway unrolled. We didn't go over. We just stood there on our side of the lake and stared. None of us said anything. It felt like we were looking at something we weren't supposed to see. We packed up in silence. No one even ate breakfast. We loaded the tents, the gear, the cooler, and pushed out down the road in Ryan's SUV. No music, no talking, just the tires grinding on gravel. Once we hit cell service, we pulled over and called the sheriff's office. The woman on the phone asked us questions, location, what we heard, what we saw. We gave her everything. She said they'd send someone out to check it. We drove the rest of the way back to Portland in total quiet. Even that night, back in our apartment, it felt like something had followed us home. Not physically, but in our heads. That tension, that feeling of being watched, it stuck with me for days. 2 days later, I got a call from a sheriff's deputy. He said a search and rescue team had gone to the lake. They'd found the campsite we mentioned. He didn't give us many details, just that someone had definitely been living there recently. There were signs of food prep, a fire ring, an old backpack. But no person, no body, just a campsite that looked like whoever was staying there had left in a hurry. Ripped tent, gear tossed around. He said it didn't look like an animal attack, no blood, no drag marks, just abandoned. I asked if they thought it was the same person we heard screaming. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no either. Just told me they'd keep investigating and let me know if they found anything else. They never called back. It's been months since then. Sometimes I try to forget about it, convince myself it was a bad dream or some weird prank. But I know what I heard. We all do. It wasn't coyotes. It wasn't a bird. It was a human being screaming for help in the middle of nowhere. And no one ever found her. That part sticks with me the most. Not knowing what happened. Not knowing if we could have done something. We were right there, just across the lake. And we stayed put. It was late September when the three of us, me, Tyler, and Jason, set out for a 4-day backpacking trip in a remote section of the North Cascades in Washington. We wanted something away from people, something that would push us a bit. None of us were new to this. We'd all done plenty of hikes before, some solo, some in pairs, but this was our first time out together this deep in the backcountry. No marked trails past a certain point, just us, topo maps, GPS backups, and instinct. By the 3rd day, we hadn't seen another person in nearly 24 hours. The air was cold and damp, the kind of cold that seeps in even when you're moving. That afternoon, we followed a faint game trail through an old-growth patch that opened into a rocky clearing surrounded by thick pine. Just beyond that, maybe 50 yards into the tree line, we spotted what looked like an old fire ring. Stones laid out in a neat circle, blackened at the base, with bits of charred wood still inside. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. We agreed it was a decent spot to camp. Flat ground, trees to break the wind, and enough distance from the trail, if you could even call it that. As we dropped our packs and started unpacking gear, I glanced toward the trees and noticed something. A shape, something low and tan, just barely visible through the branches. I thought it might have been a bush at first, but it didn't quite fit. I squinted. It was a tent. A single, small dome tent maybe 50 yards from our site, hidden a little in the trees, like it was purposely tucked away. We hadn't heard or seen anyone all day, and the way the tent blended into the brush made it easy to miss unless you were looking right at it. We stood around, staring at it in silence for a few moments. Then Tyler called out, just a single "hey," nothing too aggressive, but loud enough for anyone inside to hear. No response. He waited, then tried again. Still nothing. After a bit of back and forth, we decided to check it out. It didn't feel right just leaving it. Maybe someone needed help. Maybe it had been abandoned. We walked slowly through the trees, crunching over pine needles and dead twigs, getting closer. As we approached, it was clear the tent was old, faded. Dust clung to the rainfly, and the fabric looked weathered and sun-bleached. A thin layer of pine needles had settled on top. It was zipped shut. No movement, no sound. Jason tapped gently on the side. Nothing. He waited, then did it again, louder. Still nothing. I remember my stomach tightening then, not from fear exactly, but unease. Something about the silence felt wrong. Tyler reached out and unzipped the tent. Inside, it was dark and musty. The first thing we saw was a sleeping bag, unrolled, lying crookedly on a foam pad. Next to it were a pair of boots, the soles facing the tent wall. An old metal flashlight rested near the entrance. But everything looked wrong. The gear was all there, boots, sleeping bag, even a small pack in the corner. But everything was covered in mold, like thick mold. Patches of green and white bloomed on the sleeping bag. The boots were cracked, the leather rotting. The flashlight had corrosion all around the base. The battery compartment split open. It looked like nobody had touched any of it in months. None of us said anything. We just stood there, looking. It didn't feel like someone had packed up and forgotten their gear. It felt like someone had just vanished, like they left in the middle of the night and never came back. We didn't mess with anything, just zipped the tent closed again and backed away. Jason marked the GPS coordinates just in case. We figured we'd report it once we got back to town. We made camp closer to the fire ring, maybe 60 or 70 feet away. None of us talked much that evening. It wasn't that we were scared exactly, but something about that tent stayed in our heads. We didn't even build a fire, just cooked on the stove, ate quickly, and sat around as the dark settled in. I slept light that night. I'd wake up at the smallest sound, wind through the trees, something scurrying across the forest floor. At one point, I thought I heard something large snapping branches, but it faded quickly, and I convinced myself it was a deer. Around 4 a.m., I woke up again. No sound this time, just a feeling. I opened my eyes and lay still. I could hear Tyler breathing softly in his bag a few feet away. Jason was in his own tent, maybe 10 yards from us. Then I saw it, a faint light. It was moving slowly, weaving between the trees just beyond our camp. Not fast, not flickering like a fire. Smooth, steady like a headlamp. At first I thought maybe it was Jason, but I couldn't hear any movement. The light wasn't coming from his direction either. It was deeper in the woods, past where we'd seen the old tent. I held my breath and watched. The light moved in a slow arc, then stopped. It didn't point toward us directly. It was angled slightly away, like whoever had it was looking for something on the ground. It hovered there for a moment, then began moving again, this time parallel to our camp, like a slow sweep. I reached over and nudged Tyler. He stirred, looked at me, and I just pointed. He saw it too. We didn't say a word, just lay there watching. The light continued for a bit longer, then faded into the trees. Gone. No sound. No footsteps. We waited a long time after that, probably half an hour, maybe more. Then I finally drifted off. When the sun started coming up, we got up in silence, packed quickly. None of us mentioned the light. We just moved, mechanically, shoved our gear into our packs, broke down the tents, cleaned up the area. We didn't eat breakfast, just wanted to get out of there. On the way out, we passed the spot where the old tent had been. It was gone. Not collapsed, not torn apart, not moved a little. Gone. No imprint in the ground, no leftover gear, no drag marks. Nothing. The pine needles were undisturbed, like it had never been there, like we had imagined the whole thing. But we hadn't. Jason still had the GPS coordinate marked from the night before. We stood there for a minute, not saying anything, just staring at the empty ground. Then we kept walking. We didn't stop until we hit the forest road where we'd left the car. On the drive back, the only thing any of us said about it was when Jason muttered, "I'm taking that marker off the GPS," and he did. We never reported it. Every once in a while, usually late at night, I think about that tent, about the gear rotting inside, about that light moving through the trees, and I wonder who put that tent there and who took it away. We were camping along a river in Utah, me and my cousin Darren. It was a remote area, not an official campground, just a wide sandy spot near a bend in the river where you could pull off the gravel road and set up camp. We'd parked our truck about a quarter-mile away and hauled our gear down a narrow, steep path. The nearest town was probably 40 miles away. No cell service, no other people, just us and the river. We'd spent most of the day fishing, exploring the banks, and collecting driftwood. By nightfall, we had a decent fire going, some food cooked up, and were just sitting around, enjoying the quiet. It was one of those cool desert nights, dry, still, and dead silent apart from the fire crackling and the soft current of the river. I remember how peaceful it felt. The stars were out really bright, and the air had that cold edge that makes you pull your jacket a little tighter. It was probably close to midnight. We'd stopped talking for a while, just sitting there staring into the fire. That kind of silence that creeps in when there's nothing left to say and you're just content. I was thinking about heading into the tent when Darren shifted in his seat and said, quietly, "Hey, someone's there." I looked up, and sure enough, just at the edge of the firelight, maybe 10 or 15 feet from us, a man was standing. He looked like he'd just walked out of the woods. Middle-aged, thin, wearing a dark coat and jeans, holding a green duffel bag in one hand. His hair was messy, beard patchy, face hollowed out. He didn't say anything, just gave us a small nod and stood there, like he was waiting for something. I remember the way the firelight flickered on his face. He didn't smile, didn't look angry either, just blank, expressionless. His eyes weren't even really on us. They were on the flames. I stood up slowly, trying not to seem nervous, and asked if he was lost or needed help. He finally spoke, voice soft but clear. He said, "I was just watching the fire from the woods." That sentence sat heavy in the air. Darren and I looked at each other. We weren't sure what to say. I asked if he was cold. He nodded once, asked if he could warm up. I didn't want to say no. Neither did Darren. What else could we do? Tell the guy to go back into the dark? So we said, "Sure, come on over." He stepped closer, set his duffel bag down behind him, and squatted near the fire, arms resting on his knees. He didn't say another word, just stared into the flames. We tried small talk, but he didn't respond. I asked where he was coming from. Nothing. Darren offered him some water. He shook his head. I noticed his shoes were worn through, soles practically falling off. His clothes were dirty, like he hadn't changed in a while. He smelled like dry sweat and something else, something like old meat. For 10 minutes, maybe more, we sat there in silence. Couldn't relax. Every time I looked at him, he was in the same position. Still, watching the fire like it was the only thing that existed. Not once did he look at either of us again. And then, without a word, he stood up, picked up his duffel bag, turned around and walked straight back into the woods. Didn't look back, didn't say goodbye, just vanished into the dark like he'd never been there. We waited a few minutes. I think both of us were half expecting him to come back, but he didn't. We poured more wood on the fire, trying to make the light go farther, trying to feel less vulnerable. We didn't talk for a long time, just kept staring at the tree line. That night, neither of us slept much. We didn't say it out loud, but we were both on edge. Every little sound made us freeze. Twigs cracking, the wind in the trees, even the river felt louder. I kept the hatchet near me under my sleeping bag. Darren had his flashlight gripped in one hand the whole time. By sunrise, we were exhausted, but we were still curious, too curious to just leave without knowing where he came from. So after breakfast, we packed our stuff and left it near the river, then started walking in the direction he'd disappeared. We followed what looked like a faint trail. Not even a trail really, just a path of trampled weeds and broken branches. After maybe 20 minutes of walking through brush and sand, we found a clearing, about 20 feet across, surrounded by thorny shrubs and juniper trees. Right in the middle was a torn-up blue tarp, half covered with dry leaves and dirt. Nearby, there were bones, small, white, brittle-looking, hanging from a length of string, like someone had tied them up for decoration. Some still had bits of dried fur clinging to them, probably squirrels or rabbits. There was a pile of charred wood where a fire had been, but not recently. Flies buzzed around something off to the side, a plastic grocery bag full of what looked like spoiled food, empty cans. A pair of socks hung on a branch, stiff and stained. There were no signs of a tent, no sleeping bag, no shelter besides the tarp. Just this weird little campsite that felt more like a den than a place a person should be living in. And the worst part was how quiet it was. No birds, no rustling, just still air and that smell again, something sour like rot. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Darren looked at me and nodded. We turned around and walked straight back to our spot by the river, packed up everything in 5 minutes, and hiked out without stopping once. We didn't even eat lunch, just got to the truck and drove, fast. We didn't talk about it for a long time, weeks maybe. When we finally did, neither of us could make sense of it. Was he just a squatter? A drifter? Some guy who lost everything and decided to disappear out there? Maybe, but there was something off. Something about how quiet he was, how he just watched the fire like he hadn't seen one in years. And those bones, why would someone string them up like that? I've been camping since. A lot, actually, but never without people. Never that deep in the woods. And I always make sure we're somewhere close to other campers, close to a road, somewhere with cell service. Because I don't care if that guy meant harm or not. Being that close to someone who lives like that, out in the open, no rules, no one watching, it reminded me how alone you really are out there, and how fast something can go from peaceful to wrong. I had been planning the backpacking trip for months. Arizona was dry, wide, and wild. Exactly what I needed. I wanted the kind of isolation that you feel in your chest, something to burn off the noise of regular life. I packed light but carefully. Tent, sleeping pad, jet boil, some dehydrated meals, a Sawyer filter, 2 water bottles, and a solar battery for my phone. I had an offline GPS map downloaded on an app one trusted. I'd even read trip reports from people who had done the same loop before. Everything should have been fine. The first day went smooth. I parked at the trailhead, locked the car, left a note on the dashboard about my route, and started hiking. The desert was alive in its own quiet way. Pale green shrubs, red rocks, and sun so bright it felt like it burned through my shirt. I followed the trail easily. Every few hours, I checked the app just to make sure I was still on track. I camped near a dry creek bed that night, tucked between 2 big boulders to block the wind. Slept okay. The stars were endless. Second day, I got up with the sun, boiled water for coffee and oatmeal, broke down camp, and moved on. The trail wasn't as well maintained now, but still clear enough. I passed a few faded cairns. Around mid-afternoon, though, the trail just sort of vanished. I stood there, looking around, spinning slowly, thinking maybe I missed a turn. I opened the app. It showed I was right on top of the line. I zoomed in, zoomed out, recentered it. Still said I was on the trail, but the landscape didn't match. No footpath, no markers, nothing. Just scattered mesquite and dry, crumbling earth. I walked forward a few hundred feet. Nothing changed. Still no trail. I turned back. Still nothing. I stood there for a long time trying to calm myself. I wasn't panicking, not yet. I was tired, hot, and a little dehydrated, but I wasn't in trouble. I had food. I had water. I had GPS. I just needed to backtrack, find the last clear section of trail, and reset. But when I turned around and walked back the way I came, I didn't see anything familiar. No cairns, no landmarks, just endless scrub and rock. My footprints had disappeared in the dust. It all looked the same. I walked for 2 hours, then stopped. My legs hurt. I sat on my pack and drank half a bottle of water. It was maybe 4 p.m. Sun still high, but I could feel the edge of it starting to drop. I pulled out the map again. Still said I was on the trail. I wasn't. I decided to climb up a nearby ridge, hoping for a better view. It was steep and covered in loose rock, but I made it up after 20 minutes. From the top, I could see for miles, but none of it looked like a trail. Just rolling terrain, harsh and dry, no signs of people. I held up my phone, no bars, not even one. I turned in circles, hoping something would flicker. Nothing. I switched on airplane mode and back off. Still nothing. I camped on the ridge that night. It was too dangerous to climb down in the dark. I set up my tent close to a boulder and cooked a small dinner. Just a pack of ramen with some jerky torn into it. Ate slowly, trying to save energy. I had 1.5 liters left now. I used a small amount to brush my teeth, then lay in my tent, scrolling through old photos just to keep my brain calm. Around 11 p.m., I heard something. Whistles. Not a bird, not wind. It was too deliberate. Short, human-sounding whistles, 2 or 3 notes each time. Paused. Then again, farther off. I froze. I hadn't seen anyone all day. I hadn't passed a single person since the trailhead. I waited, holding my breath. Came again. Same pattern. 2 short whistles, like someone trying to get attention. I sat up and listened hard. Eventually, I whistled back. Just once. Same tone. Same pattern. Nothing. Then, a few minutes later, more whistles. But from farther away. Same kind, but no reply to mine. I sat there in the dark for over an hour, clutching my knife, listening. They kept coming and going, sometimes close, sometimes far. Like someone moving. Or like, I don't know. I eventually fell asleep out of pure exhaustion. But it wasn't deep sleep. It was the kind where your body rests but your mind doesn't. The next morning, I packed up early and hiked down the ridge, choosing a direction that gently sloped down toward what I hoped would be a drainage or wash. My plan was to follow any water feature I found until I hit a known road or trail. I rationed my water, just a few sips every hour. By noon, the sun was relentless, and my shirt was stuck to me with sweat and dust. I hadn't heard any whistles since morning, but I kept checking over my shoulder. Around 1 p.m., I found a trail marker, but it wasn't for the trail I started on. It was a different route entirely, one I hadn't planned to be on. It was worn and overgrown, but it was something. I followed it, limping a little now. My left ankle had started to hurt from stepping weird on a loose rock earlier. After another hour, I saw the faint tracks of tires, wide, dusty ones. A fire road. It was rough, but clearly used by vehicles sometimes. I sat down on a rock and just stared at it for a second. My legs were shaking, not from fear, just fatigue. My skin felt burned. My mouth was dry, but I was out. I walked the fire road for almost another mile before I saw the tan SUV coming around a corner. Forest Service. I flagged him down. The ranger gave me a bottle of water, asked where I came from, what happened. He didn't seem surprised. Said it happens more than people realize out there. I didn't talk much, just nodded. He drove me back to the main station. I filled out a short report. They offered to get a medical check, but I said I was fine. I just wanted to get to my car and go home. Before I left, one of the older rangers, guy in his 60s, leathery skin, slow talker, mentioned that a hiker went missing out there the year before. Young guy, same general area, never found. No gear, no remains, nothing. They'd searched hard, too. Local Navajo trackers had said the land out there tricks the eyes. Said the rock and vegetation formed false trails. Stuff that looked like footpaths but went nowhere. I nodded, but I was thinking about the whistles. You can say false trails. You can say terrain confusion. You can even say heat stroke, dehydration, whatever. But I know what I heard. I was alert, focused. I wasn't hallucinating. Those whistles were real. I didn't hear animals. I didn't hear wind. I heard someone or something whistling from multiple directions, moving around me. I haven't gone back. I still hike, still backpack, but I stay on well-traveled trails now. Trails with people, signs, signals. I still think about that second night, sitting in the dark, trying to decide whether to respond. Whether I'd made myself known to something I didn't understand. And maybe that's the part that gets me, that I whistled back, that I answered, and whatever it was, kept going. We were car camping at a small campground in Northern California, just the two of us, me and my friend Josh. It was a quiet, forested place, about 20 minutes off the main road, tucked into the edge of a state forest. There were maybe 10 or 11 designated campsites, spaced far enough apart to give you privacy, but not far enough to feel totally alone. Each site had a fire ring, a wooden picnic table, and just enough flat ground for a tent or two. Pit toilets were located down a small path near the entrance, and the camp host's RV was parked at the far end of the loop. No rangers stayed overnight, and the camp host left right after sunset most nights. You were basically on your own once it got dark. We pulled in on a Friday afternoon and picked the second site from the end. It was shaded with a view of a small creek down the hill. No one else was at the sites on either side of us, which was perfect. Josh backed the car in while I started setting up the tent. We didn't bring anything fancy, just a 4-person dome tent, 2 sleeping bags, and a small cooler with food. We had firewood, a lantern, and a little propane stove to cook on. Nothing too complex. The plan was to just relax for the weekend. Hike a little, cook outside, sleep in. Nothing serious. By dusk, we had a fire going, dinner done, and were sitting around the flames with a couple of beers. The sun had set completely by 8:30 or so, and it was quiet except for the sound of insects and the occasional breeze through the trees. It was the kind of quiet that feels peaceful at first, until it gets too quiet and your ears start trying to fill in the gaps. We stayed up until around 10:30, then put out the fire and climbed into the tent. I had just started to drift off when I saw something through the thin fabric of the tent. Headlights, faint but definitely there. I sat up and unzipped the window flap just enough to peek out. The road into the campground curved past our site, and just past that curve I could see a car, maybe a sedan or a compact SUV, pull up along the edge of the road. The headlights stayed on for maybe 10 seconds, then shut off. But the car didn't pull into a campsite. It just sat there. I waited, watching. A minute or two later, the driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. Just one person. No flashlight, no camping gear, no cooler, not even a backpack. He walked slowly toward the treeline, away from the car, and disappeared behind some brush. I kept watching, half expecting him to pop back out and start unpacking a tent or something, but he never did. Eventually, I lay back down. I didn't want to wake Josh unless it felt serious. The guy wasn't doing anything yet, just standing out there. I told myself maybe he got lost or was looking for a site in the dark. Maybe he was just taking a break from driving. I didn't like it, but I didn't know what else to do. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Around 1:30 a.m., I woke up again. This time it was footsteps, not the kind you imagine or half hear in the wind. Real, steady footsteps, on gravel, close. My heart jumped straight into my throat. I didn't move at first, just opened my eyes and stayed perfectly still, listening. The footsteps were slow, maybe 10 or 15 feet from the tent. Not rushing, just walking, confident. I slowly turned my head toward the tent window, trying not to make any sound. I reached over to where I'd left my phone earlier, grabbed it, and checked the screen. No signal, no surprise. I unzipped the flap a tiny bit and looked out. The same man from before was standing by our picnic table. He was facing the fire ring, not moving. His hands were at his sides, just standing there, staring at the blackened circle of stones where our fire had been earlier. He wasn't doing anything, wasn't touching our stuff, wasn't looking into the tent, just staring. I didn't understand it. There was no reason for someone to be there, and the way he stood, completely still, It didn't feel like someone wandering around lost or looking for help. It felt deliberate, like he was thinking or waiting. He stood there for maybe a minute, maybe more. It felt like forever. Then he turned slowly, walked back the way he'd come, and disappeared into the trees. I listened carefully and eventually heard the soft thunk of a car door closing, followed by an engine starting. No headlights came on. He drove off in the dark. I didn't sleep again that night. Neither did Josh. I woke him up after the guy left, and we sat inside the tent, whispering, trying to figure out if we should pack up and leave. But it was pitch black, and the road out of the campground was full of sharp turns and cliffs with no guardrails. We decided to wait until morning. At first light, we walked over to where the car had been parked. The gravel on the side of the road was disturbed, and there were faint footprints near the edge. No license plate number, no obvious clues. We couldn't remember the make or model clearly. It was too dark, just that it was dark-colored, maybe gray or black, compact. When the camp host showed up later that morning, we told him what had happened. He looked concerned but not exactly surprised. Said nobody had checked in late the night before, no reservations, and he hadn't seen any unfamiliar vehicles when he did his rounds earlier that afternoon. We gave him what little description we had. He asked us to write it down, along with anything we remembered about the car or the man. Josh and I sat on the picnic table with a pen and notepad, going over every little detail. We couldn't agree on the guy's age. Josh thought mid-30s, I thought closer to 50. Clean-shaven, average build, no visible bags or gear. That was about it. The host said he'd report it to the park office and keep an eye out in case the guy came back. He took down the notes and thanked us. That was the last we heard of it. We stayed one more night, but neither of us slept well. Every crack of a branch, every gust of wind felt like footsteps. We didn't light a fire that night, just ate cold food, sat in the car for a while, then crawled into the tent early with a hatchet between us. By sunrise, we were packed and gone. I checked the state park website a few times after that to see if there had been any news. Nothing. No reports, no warnings, no updates. It was like it never happened. Just another quiet weekend in the forest. But that image stayed with me. The way he stood there, the stillness, no expression, like he wasn't there for us, but also wasn't not there for us. Like he was waiting to decide something. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he wanted. But every time I think about going camping again, that scene flashes through my mind. A man in the dark, alone, staring at a cold fire pit for no reason I'll ever understand. I went solo camping in the Rockies last September, way past the busy season, when most people had packed up for the year. I wanted quiet, isolation. I picked a dispersed spot miles from the nearest trailhead. No cell signal, no ranger outpost, nothing. Just me, the trees, and the sky. I parked my truck off an old logging road, hiked in for about 3 hours until I found a spot flat enough for my tent and near a small creek for water. No sign of anyone else, no footprints, no trash, no old fire pits. Felt untouched, and that's exactly what I was looking for. That first day was uneventful. I set up my tent, filtered some water, made a fire, and cooked some dehydrated stew. The air smelled like pine and cold rock, and the only sounds were squirrels chirping and wind moving through the branches. As the sun dropped behind the ridge, the temperature fell hard. I layered up, sat by the fire until it burned low, and then crawled into my tent around 9 p.m. It was dead quiet that night. No animals, no wind, just the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I had a small headlamp clipped to the ceiling of the tent, but I turned it off after a few pages of reading and let the dark swallow everything. I woke up around 2 a.m. It wasn't a noise that woke me, not at first. I think it was that sixth sense, the kind of thing that presses on your chest before you know why. I blinked into the dark and listened. That's when I heard them, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunch, pause, crunch, crunch, another pause. Someone or something walking near my tent. It wasn't an animal. I've heard deer and elk before, this wasn't that. These were bipedal steps, human. Each one landed with weight and intention. They weren't rushing. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to be stealthy either. They were moving in an arc, maybe 10 to 15 feet away, circling the tent. I didn't move. I didn't even sit up. I just lay there, trying to breathe as quietly as I could. My heart was hammering in my chest. I reached slowly, under my sleeping bag, to where I kept my knife. A basic folding blade. Not much, but better than nothing. The footsteps stopped. I stared at the roof of the tent, too afraid to make a sound. Then, a voice. A man's voice. Low, calm, soft, like someone trying not to wake a child. "This one's not it." That was all he said. Then silence. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. No more footsteps. No voices. Just dead quiet again. My hand was locked around the knife handle, white-knuckled. I tried to hear anything. Twigs breaking, branches swaying. But there was nothing. It was like whoever had been there had vanished, or was still standing somewhere nearby, watching. I had no way of knowing. I didn't move the rest of the night. I didn't unzip the tent. I didn't even sit up. I just lay there, frozen, knife clenched in one hand, the other wrapped around my sleeping bag. I kept thinking, what did he mean? This one's not it. What else could that mean except they were looking for someone, or something, and they thought they found it, me, until they didn't. I must have dozed off eventually. Not real sleep, just that kind of blackout your body forces when it can't handle being awake anymore. At first light, around 6 a.m., I slowly unzipped the tent door, heart pounding. I poked my head out and scanned the trees. No one, no movement. The forest was still. I stepped out barefoot, still in my base layers, and looked around the campsite. That's when I saw the boot prints, about 10 feet from my tent. Leading in from the woods and curving around the back of the tent were prints, clear as day, deep heel and toe impressions, maybe a size 10 or 11. Not mine. I had hiking boots, yes, but I hadn't walked around the tent like that. I'd set it up from one side, not done any laps. And these prints came in from the trees and ended near the back corner of the tent. Then just stopped. No return trail, like whoever made them walked in, spoke, and vanished. But that wasn't the worst part. Near the fire pit I had built the day before, maybe 8 or 10 feet from the tent, was a single tent stake, just lying there on the ground. A different kind from mine. I had aluminum stakes, lightweight, rounded ends. This one was heavier, steel, bent slightly at the top like it had been pulled out with force. No reason it should have been there. I hadn't brought any extra, and mine were all still hammered in tight. This one, it didn't belong. I packed up right away. No breakfast, no coffee, just shoved everything into my pack, stomped out the fire ring, and got moving. I didn't even take time to fold the tent properly. Just stuffed it into the bag and slung it on. I kept checking behind me as I hiked out. Every 20 steps or so, I'd stop and listen. Nothing, just birds and the sound of my boots on dirt. But I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched, like eyes were on me, just out of sight. The 3-hour hike back to the truck felt like 10. Every bend in the trail made my chest tighten. Every fallen log felt like a trap. I kept my knife in my hand the whole time, even though it was useless against a real threat. When I finally got back to the truck, I locked the doors before I even sat down. Then I sat there, breathing hard, watching the trees through the windshield. I didn't start the engine for almost 10 minutes. I just sat there, gripping the wheel. I never reported it. What would I even say? Someone walked around my tent and said something cryptic in the dark? No one would take that seriously. There was no crime, technically, just a voice, a stake, footprints. But to this day, I think about it constantly. I replay it in my head. That voice, that sentence. This one's not it. What if it had been? What if they'd decided I was? I don't solo camp anymore. I still hike, still go out into the woods, but always with someone else now. Always closer to a trailhead. I carry bear spray and a satellite communicator. I never camp in the same spot twice, and I always listen hard before I fall asleep. Some nights I wake up out of nowhere, thinking I heard something, a footstep, a voice, and every time I hold my breath and wait, heart pounding, knife within reach, just in case. Because I still don't know who that was out there, or what they were looking for, and I never want to find out.